Arguments over the language, the terminology used to describe, criticize, and resist the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land had taken place for decades before the genocide that is currently underway. Phrases like "from the river to the sea," terms like "intifada," and now chants like "death to the IDF" have all been dissected, often misrepresented, but there's been much less attention paid to the language that is normalized within Israel. This goes beyond political and media narratives. It includes online content, songs, and chants routinely used to dehumanize Palestinians. To dissect that kind of discourse and to tell us what it's like to be surrounded by it, we are speaking with a Palestinian political analyst, a specialist in cultural studies, Abdaljawad Omar. He joins us from Ramallah in the West Bank. Mr. Omar, thanks for speaking with us here at the Listening Post today. Let's start with this. We have focused a great deal on the language used by Israeli politicians, used by the Israeli media when it comes to talking about Palestinians. But there's a lot more language out there that's also worth looking at. Can you start by painting us a picture of the broad cultural and narrative landscape in Israel when it comes to people like you, Palestinians, how you're perceived, how you are talked about?
Well, I think in a nutshell, if Palestinians are talked about, because many Israelis actually try to ignore our presence and existence on this land, we're seen through a very particular lens, one of which is that Palestinians are an obstacle towards the realization of this kind of pure ethno-supremacist state. Palestinians are seen as some sort of existential threat by just being there. Nothing else, not even, raising a political statement or having any sort of political claim. That type of discourse permeates Israeli society to the extent that we can say that Israelis have some sort of revulsion towards Palestine. And we see that permeate not only through, as you said, the political machine in Israel, its media narrative, but also among many Israelis that we encounter either when, a Palestinian is taken and being beaten up by soldiers, laughed at, sadistically ridiculed, or through this kind of acts of domination that many Israelis insist on enacting. So that's the cultural prism. Either we don't exist, and if we exist or they see us, it arouses a lot of revulsion, suspicion, and of course a lot of paranoia.
You're sitting in Ramallah, in the West Bank, and you're surrounded by all kinds of messaging from Israeli settlers, the state. It comes in many forms, like this billboard that was erected at the end of last year, which reads, "No future in Palestine." What is it like to be surrounded by that kind of messaging?
I mean, it actually arouses mixed feelings. On the one hand, I mean, we see this kind of insecure settler, this unsettled settler, that needs to affirm their own presence on the land by planting flags everywhere, by reminding us that there's no future for us, by attacking villages as if they know or realize somewhere deep down in their subconscious that they're doing something wrong, but affirming this desire to erase us and disappear us. And of course, that is on some level met by Palestinians with some ridicule. It does arouse, kind of an ironic glance. Why are you so sensitive? Why do you need to affirm yourself? The other reaction is, of course, a lot of fear and anxiety, because on the one hand, you see this unsettled settler, but you see him also having weapons, roaming around hilltops in the West Bank, for instance, and attacking villages, as we saw happening recently in the village of Kufr Malik, where 3 Palestinians were killed. We see them, coming through and trying to assert a dominance through this exertion of violence as well. Not to mention that we in the West Bank are sitting now and watching what is unfolding in terms of the genocide happening at this current moment in Gaza, and of course the daily massacres. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety among Palestinians in the West Bank, a lot of fear that this sensitive, vulnerable, unsettled settler that is also impugned and allowed and permitted by the Western powers to continue with the unleashing of violence on Palestinian bodies without any consequences. So that's the two feelings that come across for Palestinians at this current moment when we see banners like "There's no future in Palestine."
Take a look at this video from back in 2024 showing a hip-hop duo playing a concert at a school in central Israel. Let's start with the lyrics from that song. How common is it for that sort of entertainment, that sort of content, to be laid out in front of Israeli kids?
I think it's quite common, and we saw that, we saw the craze coming across in Israel, specifically after October 7th, when a lot of these songs came through. They became part of the popular culture. The song Harbu Darbo, I think it's called, actually made it to be the number one in the Billboard charts in Israel itself. The lyrics contains a lot of violent imagery of Israeli punishing Palestinians in Gaza, of Israeli killing. It's full of this need and desire for revenge. And of course, it appropriates a lot of the language, of course, that came from Israeli politicians like Netanyahu. So this is the type of lyrics. I think it's common. We see it, going on in schools. We see that type of incitement happening culturally on multiple levels. It's a popular culture in Israel. And we should remember that these schools, of course, are graduating children, many of whom will actually go and join the Israeli army and will become, policemen and officers capable of actually enacting the violence that they're actually also inciting through these songs. So this is not only about a culture of incitement. It's not only about a culture of punishing the Palestinians and the Arabs that live within the domain of Israeli power and sovereignty, and within Israel's terror regime that enacts on Palestinian bodies, but it's a culture of incitement that actually can enact that violence on Palestinian bodies.
Staying with music for a moment, this past week, much of the media and political establishments in the United Kingdom deemed that a certain chant that was heard at the Glastonbury Festival, "Death to the IDF," they deemed that to be anti-Semitic and a call for violence against all Israelis. Is that what you were hearing? And if not, why not?
I think, nobody in Palestine would take seriously the accusation that this is a form of anti-Semitism because, in our Palestinian context, the very idea that fighting our occupation and fighting against, an Israeli state that wants to continue to capture us, annex land, imprison us, kill us at will, is something that has nothing really to do with the identity of those who are enacting that violence. If, for instance, the French came and colonized Palestine, that we still would resist the French. Palestinians are not motivated by the identity of those who came to Palestine and colonized Palestine. But I think also many Jews who actually have nothing to do with the state of Israel critique it, anti-Zionist, associating the entire Jewish population with the acts of a military machine that is now enacting and enforcing a genocide upon Gaza, with videos coming out of Gaza, seeing these soldiers dancing to the destruction of universities in Gaza, or wearing Palestinian women lingerie, or just simply taking pleasure in the amount of violence they're enacting on a daily basis in the Gaza Strip. That is something that is coming across for people, and it should be seen as a normal reaction that type of military machine that allows this form of unleashing to happen against Palestinian civilians and Palestinians in Gaza specifically, but also in the West Bank, would be met by chance of death. And here, death it means in a metaphorical sense, death of a machine that maintains a system that is rotten, that is racist, that is denying Palestinians their freedom and liberation. And that's how we in Palestine saw the images coming from the festival in the UK.
All of the pushback that Israel and some of the governments that support it are getting these days, a lot of that has to do with the fact that public opinion about Israel across significant populations around the world has taken a sharp negative turn. Is that how you're seeing it? And are you feeling that in Palestine?
In fact, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're witnessing it. I think it gives us a lot of hope that the Palestinian message is coming across, that more people are becoming aware of the conditions that Palestinians live under, our yearning for liberation. And I think you're right. I mean, today we're witnessing a change. Perhaps there's still no moral consensus around Palestine, but I think what we can surely say is that, Israel as, a central figure, as a moral compass, as a political entity that is supported wholeheartedly by much or large segments of Western society, that dominant Zionist narrative is being displaced. And I think one of the signs for that is the triumph of Zahra Mamdani in New York, where we see somebody who was immersed in pro-Palestinian politics, who did not really apologize for his past, and still managing to garner a win in a Democratic primary for mayor in New York City. I think this is significant. I think it shows that also much of the Western publics today are not only not as vested in safeguarding Israel, or at least in not looking at Israel as some sort of litmus test for political success in the West. And I think that's what happened with Zahra Mamdani, that today, being pro-Palestinian does not mean that you're excluded from politics. You can engage in politics. You can run for the mayor of New York City. You might even win the elections. And being immersed in pro-Palestinian politics does not mean that you're excluded. The idea that, to keep guarding Israel, to cover over Israel, that you need to go to the extent of sounding nonsensical, of sounding ridiculous, of making, arguments that are actually not really grounded in reality. I think that is not anymore something that is actually coming across. And this is why we've seen more and more, Western elites and political elites going for the criminalization of Palestine Action Group, criminalization of Palestinian activism more broadly, because they sense that threat, that their own discourse around Israel has met, a certain limit. People are not necessarily convinced by these form of nonsensical and ridiculous statement that people in power are making anymore, trying to cover over what Israel is doing in Gaza, when they can see on their phones and of course across their laptops the extent of violence. That is the truth that is coming out, and I think it will be hard for the political class in the West to maintain the dominant narrative of Israel in its place that has been historically secured in the minds and imagination of much of their publics as of this moment.
We're going to leave it there. Abdaljawad Omar, thanks so much for speaking with us here at the Listening Post today.
Thank you for having me.